Leader, third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, last week we heard from the BCTF that this government is putting forth essentially the same proposals in contract negotiations that the former government did in 2014. In particular, Honourable Speaker, government has tabled larger maximum class sizes and fewer specialty teachers. In 2014, Honourable Speaker, the now Minister of Education stated that class size and composition was a, and I quote, central issue, end quote, in the ongoing teacher strike at the time, and that it was, and I quote, critical, end quote, and that, and I quote, class size and composition do impact learning outcomes, end quote. My question through you, Honourable Speaker, is to the Minister of Education. Starting in 2002 and culminating in the landmark Supreme Court of Canada decision on November the 10th, 2016, the BCTF fought hard to restore provisions regarding their ability to bargain class size and composition. What was government thinking when they tabled their class size and composition proposals, and what does he think this will do to the morale of BC teachers?
Minister of Education.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question because he did indeed go through a litany of damaging years in public education in British Columbia that stand in stark contrast to the record of our government over the last 21 months. Let's remember that for 16 years, Mr. Speaker, that government over there, the opposition now, fought with teachers, ripped up contracts.
Members. Members, the Minister of Education has the floor. Thank you.
I think they're a little sensitive about losing in court, Mr. Speaker.
Members.
Three times, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
Members, if Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's really sensitive because they lost 3 times in the Supreme Court when it came to The point is, Mr. Speaker, they wasted 12 years. They ripped resources away from kids and families. They demonized teachers, and they lost. And we're taking a different approach, Mr. Speaker. I think the member who asked the question would like an answer, and I think you will appreciate that. And here's what the answer is, Mr. Speaker. In 21 months, our government has added $1 billion of annual resource operations. We've hired 4,000 new teachers and 1,000 education assistants. Funding for students with special needs is up 23%, Mr. Speaker. Rural education funding is at a record high and up under our government, Mr. Speaker.
Members.
And I would ask the members opposite to read some headlines they might not want to read. The Delta Optimist, the Kelowna Courier, each one of them is saying that for the first time in 15 years, they don't have to cut budgets, they don't have to fire teachers, they've got funding and a government that's on their side.
Leader, third party on a supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I thank the Minister for the answer to the question. I'm not sure it was the question that I asked, but at least there was a long answer there, so I do appreciate the words being and the facts being brought forward. Honourable Speaker, in 2014, the current Minister of Education spoke passionately about how the BC budget of the day, and I quote, robs from the pocketbooks of ordinary British Columbians and fails to invest in the future, end quote. He was talking about the lack of education support, specifically the lack of school support workers at the time. According to the BCTF president, Glenn Hansman, the new position of the BC government would, and I quote, wipe out each and every word that teachers got back through the Supreme Court of Canada's decision and replace it with watered-down language that's worse than what exists in most school districts across the province, end quote. On March the 17th, Honourable Speaker, the Minister of Education told the Globe and Mail this: the table, and I quote, the table is set different than, any set of negotiations in the last 16 years. Our government is not seeking any concessions. We are seeking changes that will benefit teachers and students. Honourable Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Education. How does he reconcile this quote with the claims of the BCTF president?
Yes.
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question again, and he'll know this as somebody who was a former negotiator himself for Labour, that bargaining is best done at the table. And what I'm proud of as our government is that we have gone to the table in this round of negotiations earlier than ever before. We have set the table with record levels of funding. I can go through that list again for the members present, but they've all been at school announcements in their ridings, so they know about it firsthand. And we have also demonstrated respect to the teaching profession. We have now, I'm pleased to say, 197,000 public servants in British Columbia who have signed on with tentative agreements under the Sustainable Services Mandating Agreement. We have 25,000 CUPE K-12 education workers who are included in that group. And I would say to the member to also listen to Mr. Hansman. I mean, he said going into the weekend, and I would echo this message with him, quote, we're still optimistic that there will be a deal. We have 5 weeks until the end of the school year. And the good news is that both sides have scheduled a lot of dates, so there's a lot of room to talk, and that's positive. We didn't have that in the last few rounds. So I will respectfully allow elected trustees who we restored democratically to the bargaining process do their work. They understand teachers. They work alongside teachers. The previous government fired them, and I think that was a huge mistake. But that is in the stark contrast that we have here. If members want to think back exactly 5 years ago, they locked out teachers, they cut their pay, they provoked British Columbia's education system, and it was a disaster. It led to the longest shutdown of schools in British Columbia history. We are in a vastly different place.
Thank you,
where we want to
Minister.
work with teachers, school districts, and get a good deal that's good for everyone.